summer of 2013, my friends and I went out to the lake for a long August weekend. We heard of a party that was taking place that night about a half an hour away from where we were staying and decided to meet up with some other friends who were attending. Mostly everyone was drunk at this point. It was already 10 p.m., and since I only had a couple of drinks throughout the day, I decided that I would drive one of the vehicles. Since there were 8 or so of us, we had to take 2 vehicles. We loaded up the cars with tents and booze since we had planned on staying the night, and off we went. The drive started out pretty normal. We didn't know exactly where we were going, so we had to rely on the cell phone GPS, which didn't work too well since we were in Cabot County. The vehicle that I was driving left about 15 minutes before the other one because they were playing some frisbee game where you had to knock off a bottle on a post, and I guess they had money on the game or something. I had been going out to the lake for my entire life at this point, but the fact that I had a really crappy GPS coupled with headlights that were very dim made for a challenging experience. We knew that we weren't far from the party, but it was evident that we were kind of lost. One thing about the area that we were in is that there are a lot of people around. There are stretches of road at night where you won't see another car ever, but there's always plenty of cabins nearby. The population of this area between winter and summer changes from roughly 5,000 to 50,000. After a good amount of driving, we see a car ahead of us with its hazard lights on. We decided to ask whoever it was for directions. Not a good idea. We pulled up beside the car, and I look over and see a guy who looked to be not much older than us, but again it was hard to tell. He appeared to be in his mid-20s with wide-frame glasses and shoulder-length hair under a mesh cap. He was just staring ahead, looking into the distance. "Hey, buddy, you don't happen to know where Spruce Bend is, do you? We're going to a party and got lost," I said. No response. The guy just kept looking ahead. "You're right," I asked. Yeah, just make your next left, and it'll be a right after that. Thank you, much appreciated." So we keep going and notice that this guy has turned off his hazard lights and is following a distance behind us. A bit strange, but we didn't think much of it at the time. We make the left that he suggested onto a really rough, bumpy gravel road and took it for roughly 3 miles. The road was really crappy, but I could see the glow of headlights behind me. The first right was the unmarked dirt road that didn't appear to go very far. We slowed down, and looking back, I'm glad we didn't. The guy was still following us, and we decided to peel out of there. He followed us right on our tail the whole way back down to the road. The road had no cabins, no identifying features, and no turns until we got to the end. Some of the guys in the car wanted to pull over. There were 5 of us and 1 of him, and they figured that we could take him, but the guy seemed nuts. I wasn't about to let some lunatic with a gun shoot all of us. So I kept driving, hung a right at the end of the road, which led out to the highway. He stopped following us at that point as we took off. The image of his car sitting at the end of that road, not moving as we sped off into the distance, is embedded in my mind. We called the other car, and they seemed to have a better GPS than we did, and they told us where to go. The party was great, but I think that night still sits with us, and I don't ever want to come across another car with its hazards on a lonely, unmarked road in the heat of the summer again. Years ago, I was home from university and was spending the evening with my girlfriend. We were feeling a little frisky, but since we were home from college at our parents' houses, we decided to go for a little drive. Our hometown was fairly rural, so it didn't take much time for us to drive out somewhere on a country road near an alfalfa field where we could have some privacy. Hardly anyone ever drove past here, maybe 1 truck every hour or so. So the engine is off, the lights are off, and our seats are reclined. My car was small, so there wasn't really any room to get in the back and go at it. But tenderness is tenderness, whether there's a stick shift between you or not. But that night, I'm glad I had to stay in the driver's seat. Just as things start to get real heated, I see some headlights in my rearview mirror coming up the road. It's not a big deal, so I toned down the action a bit, waiting for it to pass. But as the truck got closer, its headlights suddenly went dark. My girlfriend wasn't aware of this. I pulled away a bit out of curiosity. Then I heard the coasting, gravelly crunch of a vehicle pulling off onto the gravel behind us. It was dark out there, no street lights or anything to go by, but with what moon there was, I could barely make out the outline of a truck behind us. No cab lights, no running engine. I asked my girlfriend if her door was locked. This stumped her dead in her tracks. She said that it was and asked why. I told her that there was someone behind us, parked in the gravel. She immediately straightened herself up, and I put my seat back up, never taking my eyes off my mirror. Then I saw the driver's side door to the truck open. The cab lights still didn't turn on in the truck, and I never saw anyone get out. But that was my sign to get out of there. I told my girlfriend that we needed to leave now, to which she quietly replied, "Okay." I started up the vehicle and, trying my best not to spin out in the gravel, drove as fast as I could onto the road. We drove back in silence for about 2 minutes, heading back towards the town, when I noticed that I could not see the sky clearly behind the vehicle. We were being followed. The truck still did not have its headlights on, but it was tailgating me very closely. I calmly informed my girlfriend that they were behind us, but we had plenty of gas and we would get back to town just fine. No big deal. She said, "Okay," in that little voice again, and went silent. This continued for about 2 minutes, and I briefly considered calling the police before the headlights behind me flared on. The truck revved its engine and pulled into the other lane. We were still on a 2-lane asphalt country road. It hauled past me like a bat out of hell. I felt like I should take her home at this point, but the last thing I wanted was for those __ to follow us to where she lived. Whoever they were, they made me uneasy. I told her as much and she agreed. We wove a flighty path through several nice neighborhoods before pulling into a cul-de-sac where we could sit and wait to see if the truck was still around. We never saw the truck again that night, but sitting in the cul-de-sac did give us the opportunity to have the intimate time that we had been wanting, all the more intense due to the constant watching to make sure we were safe. Looking back, I'm sure it was some country farm people who were used to catching kids making out near their fields. They probably wanted to bang on our windows to give us a good scare for fun. But I have to wonder why they would follow us for so long, and why they passed us the way they did. Were they out for a joyride, or were they looking for some entertainment? When I was younger, each summer and almost every New Year, my family would pack the car and go on a road trip to visit family in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in North Texas around 6 p.m. in order to reach our destination the next morning. So around 2 a.m., we crossed into Mexico. And that's when things got weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside our car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of the cacti. We'd been in Mexico for about an hour and still had few more to drive, and I remember sleeping but still being semi-conscious of what was around me because I didn't have the skill to really fall asleep in a car. So when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. "Miguel, that car behind us. It's been behind us since we left Laredo." My dad peeked at the car, shrugged off my mother's tension. "A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Reynosa or another city." And he left it at that. Despite his sureness, my mom kept a wary eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings and I were hyper-aware of the car and entertained ourselves with watching the car through the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. We got tired pretty quick. "He's getting closer," my mother noted, and we turned to watch as the car inched closer and closer to ours. "He's too close, Miguel." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car, and on a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere with another few hours until daylight, it was downright scary. We couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, and he didn't speed away either. He just drove, and the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most tense we had ever experienced. The car would ease off sometimes, only to press its blinding headlights against our rear once more, like he knew he was freaking us out and enjoying it. It was during one of the periods that the car had pulled away that my mom spotted a police car up ahead parked on the side of the road, and she didn't miss a beat. "Pull over! Right in front of the police! Pull over right now, Miguel!" And he did. And the car kept driving. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been as he watched my dad park our car right in front of him. The policeman came over and asked what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything. The car, the way it followed us and taunted us. The policeman took her claims seriously and told us of how people were victimized and had their cars stolen on these empty highways by thugs and criminals. And then he offered to drive behind us for a while to make us feel safe. We drove off with the police cruiser behind us, relieved. Until about 10 minutes later, when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words and my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the car pulled over on the side of the road, waiting. Hello, everyone. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful or entertaining, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Your support motivates us to create more content you'll love. Thanks a million. And if you've just subscribed, please drop a comment saying, "I subscribed." We'd love to welcome you to our community.